Most people believe that failure comes from one catastrophic mistake, a moment of weakness, a single bad decision that derails everything. But that's not how most people lose. They lose in the small moments, the quiet surrenders, the impulses they didn't resist when no one was watching. Self-control is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. But it is the invisible force that separates those who build something lasting from those who restart every few months. This is about the discipline that no one sees, the restraint that shapes everything. Let's talk about why self-control quietly determines success more than talent, intelligence, or motivation ever will. Think about the last time you failed at something important, a goal you set, a habit you tried to build, a change you wanted to make. Was it one massive failure, or was it a series of small compromises that accumulated over time? Most likely it was the latter. Most failures don't happen because you lack a plan. They happen because you couldn't follow it. You knew what to do, you had the strategy, the resources, the time. But in the moment, you chose comfort over progress. You scrolled instead of worked. You skipped instead of showed up. You indulged instead of delayed. And one choice became two became a pattern. The pattern became your result. The gap between knowing and doing is where most people live. They understand what needs to happen. They just can't make themselves do it consistently. This gap is not about knowledge, it's about self-control. Discipline is not built from intensity. It's built from the ability to resist short-term comfort for long-term progress. Every time you choose the harder path when the easier one is available, you're training self-control. Every time you don't, you're training impulsivity. Most people think they lack discipline. What they actually lack is the ability to say no to themselves in the small moments. Because discipline isn't about doing more, it's about refusing what doesn't serve you. The world is designed to make you fail at this. Every app, every algorithm, every convenience. They're all optimized to reduce friction and increase consumption. Your environment is constantly pulling you toward the path of least resistance. And if you're not intentional about resisting, you'll drift. Self-control is the ability to choose friction when ease is available, to choose delay when instant is offered, to choose less when more is the default. This is not natural, this is not easy, but it is necessary. Your brain is wired to prioritize immediate reward over delayed success. This is not a flaw, it's biology. For most of human history, survival depended on taking what was available now. Food, safety, comfort. Waiting meant risk. So your brain developed a system that makes immediate gratification feel urgent and future rewards feel abstract. When you see a notification, your brain releases dopamine. When you think about working on a long-term goal, it doesn't. When you eat something sweet, you feel satisfaction now. When you skip it for your health, the reward is months away. This is why self-control feels like a battle. You're fighting millions of years of evolutionary wiring that tells you to take the easy path. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning and impulse control, is constantly competing with the limbic system, which drives immediate emotional responses. And the limbic system is faster, stronger, more automatic. This is why you can know something is bad for you and still do it. The rational part of your brain is overruled by the emotional part. But here's what changes everything. The more you practice self-control, the stronger the prefrontal cortex becomes. The more you give in to impulse, the stronger the limbic system becomes. You are literally rewiring your brain with every choice you make. But here's what most people miss. Self-control is not a personality trait, it's a trainable skill. You're not born disciplined or undisciplined. You become disciplined through repeated practice of restraint. Every time you resist an impulse, you strengthen the neural pathways that make future resistance easier. Every time you give in, you reinforce the pathways that make future surrender more likely. This means that self-control is cumulative. The more you practice it, the less effort it requires. But it also means that every small failure makes the next one easier. This is why people spiral. One missed workout becomes a week. One cheat meal becomes a month. The skill of self-control is built in the small moments, and it erodes in the small moments too. Think of self-control like a muscle, not in the motivational sense, in the literal physiological sense. When you use it, it gets stronger. When you don't, it atrophies. But unlike physical muscles, self-control doesn't require rest days. It requires consistency. Every small act of restraint is a rep. Every moment you resist is training. And the compound effect of this training is exponential. The person who practices self-control daily for a year is not just better at it, they're operating in a completely different category. Because at a certain point, self-control stops feeling like effort. It becomes automatic. It becomes who you are. Most people approach discipline wrong. They rely on willpower. They try to resist temptation through sheer mental effort. But willpower is a limited resource. It depletes throughout the day. And when it runs out, you default to your environment. Disciplined people understand this. They don't rely on willpower. They design their environment to reduce temptation. If you don't want to eat junk food, don't keep it in your house. If you don't want to waste time on your phone, don't bring it into your workspace. If you don't want to skip workouts, remove the friction that makes starting hard. This is not weakness, this is strategy. Self-control is not about resisting everything. It's about removing the need to resist in the first place. The people who seem effortlessly disciplined are not fighting constant battles. They've structured their lives so that the default option is the right option. They've made discipline automatic, and automation is always stronger than motivation. There's a concept in behavioral psychology called decision fatigue. Every decision you make throughout the day depletes your mental resources. This is why you're more likely to break your diet at night than in the morning. Why you're more likely to skip a workout after a long day. Why you're more likely to scroll when you're tired. Your willpower is finite, and if you're using it to resist temptation all day, you will eventually run out. The solution is not to build more willpower, it's to reduce the number of decisions you have to make. Disciplined people automate their behavior. They create systems, they build routines, they eliminate options. They don't decide whether to work out. They work out at the same time every day. They don't decide whether to eat healthy. They meal prep. They don't decide whether to focus. They remove distractions. This is how you make self-control effortless. Not by trying harder, by designing better. Intensity gets attention, restraint gets results. Most people start strong. They go all in, they commit fully, they burn bright, and then they burn out. Because intensity is not sustainable. Restraint is. The person who works out 6 days a week for a month and then quits has less progress than the person who works out 3 days a week for a year. The person who cuts out all sugar and then binges 2 weeks later has less progress than the person who moderates consistently. Restraint is what protects consistency over time. It's the ability to do less than you're capable of so that you can keep showing up. This is the discipline that no one celebrates. The decision to stop before you're exhausted. The decision to maintain instead of maximize. But this is the discipline that lasts because it's built on sustainability, not intensity. Most people lose progress not because they didn't try hard enough. They lose it because they tried too hard and couldn't maintain it. There's a reason why most New Year's resolutions fail by February. People try to change everything at once. They go from 0 to 100 overnight. And it works for a week, maybe 2. But then reality sets in. The motivation fades, the effort feels unsustainable, and they quit. The problem is not that they lacked commitment, it's that they lacked restraint. They didn't pace themselves, they didn't build gradually, they didn't protect their ability to continue. Restraint is the discipline of doing less than you're capable of in the moment so that you can do more over time. It's the decision to stop at 8 reps when you could do 10, to work for 45 minutes when you could push for 2 hours, to say no to one more episode when you could binge the whole season. This feels counterintuitive. It feels like you're leaving progress on the table. But you're not. You're protecting your ability to show up tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Because consistency beats intensity every single time. Self-control is not just about behavior, it's about identity. When you consistently choose restraint over impulse, you're not just building discipline. You're becoming someone who does not betray their own long-term goals. Every time you follow through when it's hard, you're proving to yourself that you are the kind of person who keeps their word, to others and to yourself. This is how self-control becomes self-respect, because you stop being someone who disappoints yourself. Most people struggle with discipline because they don't trust themselves. They've broken too many promises to themselves. They've quit too many times. But every act of self-control rebuilds that trust. Every time you resist an impulse, you're telling yourself, I am someone who follows through. And over time, that identity becomes stronger than any temptation. You stop needing motivation. You stop needing willpower. You just act in alignment with who you've become. This is the quiet power of self-control. It doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you are. There's a concept in psychology called identity-based behavior. It's the idea that your actions flow from your sense of self. If you see yourself as a disciplined person, you act disciplined. Not because you're trying to, but because that's who you are. Most people try to change their behavior without changing their identity. They try to act like someone they're not, and it feels like constant effort. But when you change your identity first, the behavior follows naturally. Every time you practice self-control, you're casting a vote for the person you want to become. Every time you resist an impulse, you're reinforcing that identity. And at a certain point, the identity becomes self-sustaining. You don't need external motivation. You don't need accountability. You don't need reminders. You just act in alignment with who you are. This is the difference between trying to be disciplined and being a disciplined person. One is a constant battle. The other is just who you are. And the only way to get there is through repeated acts of self-control. Small choices, quiet restraint, consistent follow-through. Over time, those choices become your identity, and your identity becomes your destiny. Here's the truth that most people avoid. Your future is shaped more by what you refuse than by what you pursue. You can have all the goals in the world, all the plans, all the ambition, but if you can't say no to distraction, comfort, and impulse, none of it matters. The person who can resist scrolling builds focus. The person who can resist quitting builds endurance. The person who can resist shortcuts builds mastery. What you refuse determines what you become. Look at anyone who has achieved something meaningful. Not the overnight successes, the people who built something that lasted. What separated them was not talent, not luck, not even opportunity. It was their ability to say no to the distractions, to the shortcuts, to the easy path. They refused more than they pursued, and that refusal compounded over time. Every time you say no to something that doesn't serve you, you're saying yes to something that does. Every time you resist an impulse, you're investing in your future self. This is the mathematics of self-control. Subtraction creates addition, restraint creates progress, refusal creates results. Most people think success is about addition, adding more effort, more intensity, more action. But success is about subtraction, removing what doesn't serve you, refusing what pulls you off course. Self-control is the discipline of subtraction, and it's the foundation of everything that lasts. The world will always offer you more content, more options, more convenience, more stimulation. And if you say yes to everything, you end up with nothing. Because attention is finite, energy is finite, time is finite. The person who tries to do everything accomplishes nothing. The person who focuses on what matters accomplishes everything. And focus is just another word for refusal. The ability to say no to the 99 things so you can say yes to the one thing. This is not about deprivation, this is about clarity. Knowing what you want and refusing everything that doesn't align with it. Self-control is not about restriction, it's about direction. Choosing where your energy goes and protecting that choice from everything that tries to pull you off course. So ask yourself, what are you refusing? Because that refusal, repeated quietly over time, will determine everything. Not what are you trying to do, not what are you working toward, not what are you hoping for. What are you refusing? What are you saying no to when everyone else says yes? What are you resisting when it would be easier to give in? What are you protecting when it would be simpler to compromise? Because those refusals, invisible and uncelebrated, are building your future. Every time you choose restraint over impulse, you're shaping who you become. Every time you resist the easy path, you're strengthening the person you're becoming. This is the quiet power of self-control. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't seek recognition, it just works, silently, consistently, relentlessly. And over time, it creates a life that most people only dream about. Not because you did more, but because you refused more. The future belongs to those who can say no, to distraction, to comfort, to impulse. And that future is shaped not in the big moments, but in the small ones, the quiet choices, the invisible restraint. This is where everything is decided, not in what you pursue, but in what you refuse.